really special people that are here to visit with us. And if I may ask John McCarthy in the back, if you would lead us all in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Oh, I pledge allegiance to the
flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now I'll sing the national anthem.
All right.
Don't quit your day job. Oh, all right, show of hands. How many new members tonight? One. That's awesome, thank you. We're having this year in 2018, we're having tremendous new membership. And just want to thank everyone, old members and new members alike, just for your support. A lot of things that are going on right here in our community, and we're only as good as all of you. And with your support, we're able to get the attention of certain individuals and committees and all that can help see the Nokomis perspective in a lot of occasions. You know, we don't win them all, but we sure give them a good fight, and the only reason we're able to give them a good fight is because of each of you. And but thank you. We've got a couple special guests with us tonight. I mentioned her a little bit earlier. Lourdes Ramirez, she's here in the back with the red jacket, and Lourdes is running for District 4 County Commission. And she's also taking signatures for a petition for signatures to be on the ballot as well. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about Lourdes and her positions, she's going to be here tonight. Afterwards, you're welcome. She'd love to speak with you. And we also have from if some folks have ever heard of CONA, like NACA, you know, Nokomis Area Civic Association. Well, we're just a little tiny. We represent 39 HOAs, but we have Kathy Benz. She's president of CONA, and which Lourdes used to be. There's Kathy. She's standing up there. She's visiting with us tonight. But she's president of the Sarasota County Council of Neighborhood Associations, and folks, they do a lot. And where we do one meeting each quarter, they do one every month. And they just had John Paxton speak this past month, if I'm not mistaken. And but they do a lot of great things. But we're glad to have you, and thank you. I've got some other special guests here, but I'm going to wait just a minute before we bring them up. Board members tonight for NACA, I have right here in the front row Pat McCarthy. I have Vicki Provencher. And Bruce Dillon. Some people have asked where Bruce is tonight. I just got off the cell phone with him, and he's on his way. So he's running a little tardy tonight, but he'll be here shortly. I always like to give you a brief update on what's going on in Nokomis. There's always a lot of rumors floating around, and if some of y'all use the next door post, I encourage it because there's a lot of great communication. It's a great communication tool. Sometimes it's not as factual as I'd like to see it, but it is good. It's a great way. Like, you know, I put out a post this morning about 6, just about for tonight, and it went out to over 4,000 people. And so if each of you are in a neighborhood or an HOA, if your neighborhoods aren't participating in that, I would encourage you to do that. Like, you know, my wife and I, we live in Mission Estates, and we've got like 100 homes there. And so I'll message everyone there, but then we also have other neighborhoods that we share information with. And like I said, we're just 100 homes, but we also have a network of over 4,000 right here in the Nokomis. So that it's called Next Door, if you'd like to check that out. So a couple things that I can share with you. I've been asked not to give specifics yet because they're still getting ready to close, but I can tell you with confidence, Albee Road, the hotel that we've been talking about. Everything has been approved with yesterday at 2 o'clock. They had to meet with county stormwater at the last minute to change something. So they were getting that taken care of yesterday afternoon. And within the next 30 days, it's, we don't know the brand, but it's going to be one of the Holiday Inn hotels. It's in that Holiday Inn group. But they'll build a hotel to be directly across the street from where the new Hilton Suites is. So it will be there. On the corner of Albee Farm and 41, can say with pretty certain confidence, there will be one, possibly two restaurants that will be going there. And hope we'll be able to announce the names of those probably sometime this summer. But one of them is pretty much for sure. And I think the community is going to really like it there. I get probably more questions about the land just north of the Bank of America on 41 that's been cleared for some time. Remember the Walmart grocery store was going to go there and then they backed out. Well, it's what I can say for certain that I shared with you in January. Bell's department store, they're going to put a Bell's outlet there. There's another store called Home Centrics, which is like a home goods store. That's going to be there. I believe there's going to be a fast food there. Going to be a Dunkin' Donuts there. And I'm not at liberty to share which grocery store, but I can tell you, I think probably 99% of this room, if not 100%, are going to welcome it with open arms, and it will be great for Nokomis. Tremendous. And that's probably not going to be able to be announced until between June and August. But they've got a couple things else that their projects that they're working on right now that as soon as they get those completed, they'll be coming to us. So that's pretty much what I've got there. And if you see this sign in front of us, okay, even though it's got NACA's website address on the bottom, NACA did not do this sign. If you've been kind of paying attention, you know about the Nokomis Inn and Suites. The new owner wants to convert that and is looking to seek an exception to the zoning so that he can put a drug rehab facility there instead of the hotel. And that has met with tremendous opposition. I will say in my 5 years at NACA, we've never had such a volatile issue as that has been. And the other is the Victory Baptist Church, that they would like to purchase a 5-acre parcel right off of Laurel Road adjacent to Legacy Trail, and they need rezone for that. And it's not that we're anti-church, because we are far from it. We're pro-church, but it just right there in that particular vicinity is not it's not compatible, you know, in our opinion. And it's not just a church, but they want to have a school. Thank you, Pat. They want to put a school there, and not that we're anti-school, but there's no acceleration or deceleration lane there. And if anybody lives in Colusa Park, I was in there this weekend and trying to pull out and turn west on 41, as tough as it is right now. And I'm thinking, my gosh, if you got, you know, schools in the mornings and afternoons, it's just even more. And I feel sorry for those folks if that's the case. So, you know, we at NACA, we have, with both folks, we have said, look, let us help you find another area. You know, you're welcome to be in Nokomis, but just not at the particular places that they've chosen. And so the reason for this sign, a lady lives in Nokomis, was at our January meeting, and a few days after the meeting, she called me up. I'd never met her before in my life, and she said, I love Nokomis, and I hate to see what some people are trying to do in Nokomis, and I want to do anything that I can. And I'm like, okay. I said, well, we're always going to need people to show up when the planning commission meetings are scheduled. And she said, no, I want to do more than that. So she printed up these signs, and she printed up a bunch. And she went to her HOA and asked for permission and was given and was granted. She's got the sign that coming in and out of her community. And then on some of the weekends, right at Mission Valley Boulevard and Laurel Road, I've put this out because you can't put it out during the week because the code officials will come by and take it. So you have to figure out when to put it out strategically. And so, but the reason is, if you're interested, and she has some more signs, because right now, we need to keep everybody's interest in these, but when they file to go before the planning commission is when we need a bunch of these. And if you want to speak to me afterwards, I can get you a sign. So I spoke with the county planning department this morning, and as of this morning, neither party has filed yet to go before the planning commission to ask for either exemption or rezone. And I'm anticipating, that strategically, they want to wait till as many people go back up north. So I'm expecting probably sometime May, June, that they'll probably file so they can be before the planning commissioners. I would say probably September, October before everybody gets back. But if you signed our list last January, we've got your name and contact information. As soon as we know something, we're going to be on the horn to everyone to, we've got to rally, because you just can't feel passionate about it and stay home. When the planning commission meeting is scheduled, we all have to show up. And doesn't mean everybody has to speak, but even if you just get up and for 30 seconds says, you know what, my name is, and I do not support this, and you go back and sit back down. I mean, that's all you have to do, but we have to show up. I know that Kathy, they've been in with some really big issues before, and they know how to rally the troops, and so we're going to use them as an example and do the same thing here, but that's what this is all about. And then, in closing for my part, I'd like to bring up Captain John Jernigan. John he was born and raised right here in Venice, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And he's been with the Sheriff Department for 29 years. And I will say this, and I state this with all the Sheriff Department. Anytime that we have needed assistance, no questions asked, they've been right there beside us and helped in any way that they possibly could. And selfishly, as a community, John has announced that he's retiring. And so we're going to lose John. But he has set a real high bar, and his replacement is here tonight, and John's going to introduce him to all of you. And I would say, get to know these people, because, we are very blessed to live in an area where there's not a lot that goes on. And, if you look really, and if you see what happens, it's not a lot of major crime, but it's the drug issue that we have in the break-ins. But they've been tremendous with us. Right here, this facility where we stand, they've helped us get this area cleaned up from some of the things that were going on that wasn't good for our community. They've been just instrumental in helping that. It's not perfect yet, but we're working on it, and I would say 90%, we're 90% where we'd like to be. And but anyway, I want to bring up John and just say thank you. And I don't know what your next plan is after you, but after, and I'm not asking for Sheriff Knight to, once his term's out, but any political ambitions, we'd like to. You need to make an announcement tonight. We're ready to go.
like you said, I've been with the agency for 29 years. Started when I was 7. It's about time for me to move on. You know, I've always had some connection to the neighborhood. I lived in this neighborhood for a while. Went to school here, so you know, I've always had that bond to the Nokomis area. Formed a lot of good partnerships and friends during my time here. You know, Pat, talked to Pat quite a bit. Bruce, you know, we're in contact frequently, as well as some of the other residents throughout the area. Anything quality of life issue that you may not feel, you know, reaches that far, you can give us a call. Don't think that. Give us a call. Let us evaluate it. If we can help you, we're going to help you. Sheriff Knight is very big and does an awesome job putting the right people in the right places. And I'm very proud to say my replacement, Captain Ryan Brown, is going to be that perfect fit to take over my position. And you're going to hear a little bit about Ryan Brown in just a few minutes. And I couldn't be more excited about who's taking over for me in the community. Like Bill said, we've worked together partnership-wise with Parks and Rec, County Commission, you name it, different entities to do whatever we can do to clean up the neighborhood and improve that quality of life. For example, you missed it, but when Bill started tonight, one of my sergeants in the back of the room, I got the 18 with me here tonight, you see them all. The sergeant looks out back with one of our patrol deputies who works night shift and sees a park visitor out back stumbling around, destroying a trash can. He's now being transported to our hotel where he's going to spend the night in jail. So, you know, it doesn't only take phone calls from you to us. You know, obviously we're out there working on it. If we see something, we're going to act on it. But if you see something, you guys need to call us. Okay? Call us when it's taking place. I'm not don't want to steal Kathy's thunder that she's going to talk about crime prevention. But we need to know about it when it's taking place. Don't delay. Give us a call. Again, what you feel may not be important could be very important. Okay? So, without further ado, Captain Ryan Brown, he's with the agency for quite a while, and you can Good evening. Like Captain Jernigan said, my name is Ryan Brown. I'm going to be a new captain over patrol. First of all, I'd like to thank Captain Jernigan. I've worked for him for almost 3 or 4 years, and he's been an excellent mentor. And I know he's been a big part of Venice and the Nokomis community, so I have big shoes to fill. I'm not one to talk about myself much, but just so you know who the new patrol captain is, I've been with the agency almost 21 years. I was born and raised in Sarasota County, Florida. My dad and his family actually came to Sarasota in 1945, and my dad's a graduate of Sarasota High School in 1958. So we've been around for a while. My mom is from Michigan, and she moved down to Venice in 1960, and she's actually a graduate of Venice High School. I grew up in the North End. I was a graduate of Booker, and then I went to the University of South Florida, where I obtained my bachelor's in criminology. I've been with the agency about 21 years. I've worked throughout many areas of the agency. I started in corrections. I worked in patrol, criminal investigations. I just did a long stint with special operations, and now I'm back into patrol. Which I'm proud to be part of. With our agency, so you know a little bit about our agency, we're 1,000 members strong in our agency with sworn and unsworn. Our agency is divided into 3 different divisions. We have courts and corrections, then we have the support services bureau, and then we have the law enforcement division. And within the law enforcement division, we have criminal investigations, we have special operations, and then we have patrol. And within patrol, we have about 200 sworn members. Now, these guys are the men and women that are the boots on the ground. When there's a 911 call, these are the guys and gals that are first responding. They're the ones driving around and marking patrol calls, working the zones. And it's a 24/7 operation, and I couldn't be prouder to be part of that. Some of my philosophies, our agency philosophies, we work off of rightful policing, where we treat all people with courtesy and respect. That's part of procedural justice. We also do what's called intelligence-led policing, which is where we look at the 6% of the population that's committing most of the crime, and we focus on them quite a bit. Some of the technology that we've employed over the last 5 years, we call it SharePoint, and it connects to every single deputy's computer within their car. And for instance, for the entire area of Sarasota County, approximately 400,000 residents, we have it broken into 21 geographical zones. And the deputies that work this area can zoom in and plug in zone 15, and there's a blog and direct control that communicates between the deputies that work this area. So the sergeants and the deputies that work the zones and areas that they're in get very familiar and intimate with what's going on in their area. And in addition to phone calls and emails and things like that, we use this computer database called SharePoint to help communicate. So we're on the cutting edge of technology and on the cutting edge of communicating with one another. Our agency is very big into community policing, such as events like this. We like to come out and get to know the community. We believe we are not an authoritative position. We are here for the community. We listen to the community and we work for our community. So we come to community events, we listen. We have some Canal Road. There's already directed that to a deputy, and he's going to be working on that. So if you have a particular location or a particular issue, you can call 911 non-emergency and relay that, or you can come to a community meeting like this and make a list, and that can be forwarded to me, and we can start working direct patrol on these problem areas. So that's another part of us coming out to these type of meetings, is getting to know exactly what are the problems we're having in the community. Talk a little bit about what's going on. Kathy Duff's going to come up in a minute and talk about some crime prevention strategies and what's going on in the Nokomis community. If you followed social media today, there was some mention of Sorrento in social media. And I'll just give you a real quick scenario of what happened. Our 911 center, we got a call that there was a residential burglary in progress, and this was occurring off of Hawkins Road. And if you know where Hawkins Road is, it's on just east of Twin Lakes Park, off of Clark Road. So not really this area. But the complainant followed the suspects, and when our patrol unit started getting in the area to follow them, they were coming south at I-75, and they actually went through Sorrento and Mission Valley to try to evade our officers. We ended up finding them northbound at I-75, and they were traveling over 100 miles an hour, and we're trying to catch up to them with lights and sirens. And we actually called off the pursuit, but the suspects were still driving erratically, and actually one of our deputies that was positioned on the off-ramp at the University and I-75, the traffic congestion, there at the UTC was so congested that the suspects could not get northbound on the interstate any further. So they made an evasive maneuver to the right to try to get off the interstate at University northbound, and they actually rear-ended, or actually sideswiped one of our patrol deputies' vehicles. They put them into a tailspin, they entered the guardrail, they crashed, and we had deputies converged on them, and we took them into custody, and we are currently under an active investigation with them right now in several vehicle burglaries out east of Twin Lakes Park. How Sorrento became involved is when we were doing this active investigation, we actually got multiple calls from Sorrento where there were bags and guns discarded. And our patrol deputies actually responded out to Sorrento. Well, when the suspects knew that we were onto them, they were trying to evade us, they actually discarded some of the stolen items that they did from the residential burglary, which did happen to be several firearms. Those suspects are in our custody now, and they're going to be interviewed by our criminal investigation section, and hopefully it'll be a lesson learned for them. So that's something that's just happened today. That's happened since 1 o'clock this afternoon. That's been evolving and ongoing. That being said, I have big shoes to fill with Captain Jernigan. I'm proud to be back part of the Patrol Bureau, and I'm excited. And with that, tonight we have Sergeant Brian James, who is in the back. Sergeant Brian James, he works this area. He knows this area very well. We actually had Deputy Luke Snagowski here to introduce. And he was with Sergeant. He's actually on his way to jail with an arrest here. so Sergeant couldn't meet Luke, but we'll get him at another point in time. With that, Kathy Duff from our crime prevention is here, and Kathy's going to talk about some other things that have been going on in the Nokomis area and maybe some crime prevention strategies. Here's Kathy Duff.
Good evening, everyone. Like mentioned, I'm Kathy Duff. I am in the crime prevention unit. From a crime prevention perspective, I always like to share with the neighborhoods the types of crimes and things that are happening in their neighborhood, so that if they're hearing about vehicle burglaries, they'll remember to, we're having a problem, I need to make sure I lock my car, or if you see something, you call and report that to us. So I looked up the crimes that have happened in the Nokomis area this past month. And over in Sorrento South, there was a vehicle burglary in Sorrento South in April. Somebody entered an unlocked vehicle and rifled through the car, and nothing was stolen out of the vehicle. And in Sorrento East, there was a vehicle burglary. Again, it was an unlocked car. Somebody entered in the car and stole change out of the console of the car. Over in the inlets, they had another vehicle burglary, again to an unlocked car. In that vehicle burglary, they stole the lady's purse out of her car. One of the other residents found the purse had been tossed behind some of the homes over there. And another person, when they found the purse, another resident came out and said, well, I seen the landscaper was by the car earlier in the day. They got with the owner of the landscape company. They confronted that employee. He admitted to the burglary, paid the lady back the $50 that he stole from her. And she doesn't want to, against my wishes, she doesn't want to pursue criminal charges against him. So that case has been kind of, I guess, figured out. In the Nokomis East area, there was a burglary to a residential burglary. Somebody went through a window, but they believe there's a former house guest who's responsible based on some of the things that were taken from the home. There was another vehicle burglary. A lady left her purse outside as she was, it wasn't a vehicle burglary, it was a purse stolen. She left her purse outside as she was carrying groceries in, and somebody took her purse from the driveway. So those were all of the crimes that have been reported this past month in all of the Nokomis area. So the theme here seems to be vehicle burglaries to unlock cars. So please remember, a majority of the vehicle burglaries we have are to unlock cars. So it's not uncommon for us to hear, vehicle burglaries occurring in this manner. So please remember to lock your car doors and not to leave valuables in your car. And if you see somebody going from car to car, please contact the sheriff's office and report that to us so we can follow up on that. A couple things I wanted to bring to your attention. If you have a burglar alarm, we request that you please register that burglar alarm with the sheriff's office. A lot of the alarm companies don't tell residents that when they're installing these systems into their homes. So please, I left on the table back here is the information about who to contact to register that burglar alarm. This way, if your alarm goes off and our deputies respond and we discover that an open door or there was a problem, we'll have contact information if you're not home to find someone to get over there to secure the home or take care of whatever needs to be taken care of. So please, it doesn't cost anything to register that alarm, so please register that with the sheriff's office, and the information's on the table. The couple more things, I left some magnets on the table. On those magnets is the non-emergency telephone number for the sheriff's office. So if you need to get in contact with us, sometimes that number is difficult to find. So the non-emergency number, it's a NACA, it goes in the refrigerator, so it's easy for you. Also on there is our sheriff's office website, sarasotasheriff.org. And we have a lot of really good information on our website. If you go to our website, all these crimes that I've talked to you about, we have a link on our website called Crime Mapping. If you click on that crime mapping, you can put your address and an email address, and you'll get an email whenever a crime happens within a 1 mile radius around that address that you put into that system. So this way you can keep updated on what's happening around your neighborhood. And also on there is our press releases, and when we have events and things like that, you can get updated on those as well. The last thing I wanted to mention to you is on May 15th, we are having the Law Enforcement Memorial at our new headquarters of Cattleman Road. That memorial is for our fallen officers, and we're honoring them at that event. I wanted to bring that to your attention because the sheriff's office is no longer downtown on Ringling Boulevard. We have moved our headquarters off of Cattleman Road. The address is on this flyer I left there for you. If you go down Cattleman Road, if any of you know where the Kennedy Orthopedic Center is, the sheriff's office building is directly behind there on Cattle Ridge Road. So we still have a front desk here in South County on 776, so if you needed to report something or get a report, you can still use the front desk here in South County. But anything else that you'll need from the Sheriff's Office, you'll need to go to the new headquarters, which is off of Town.
It's not co-located with the EOC.
I beg your pardon?
It's not co-located in the area of the EOC.
The EOC is off of Beta Vista and Calumet.
Right.
And it's right there behind where the SCAT bus depot is.
Yeah.
The
You're not
Sheriff's
there.
Office is down the road. We're just south of there. And again, it's on Cattle Ridge, right behind that Kennedy White Center. So it's
About a
in
mile
different
south.
location.
Mile south from the EOC.
Yeah, I know where Kennedy White's at.
Thank you very much.
Folks, I think we're in good hands. What do you think? They did a tremendous job for us. Real quick, we met with Parks and Recreation last month, and we, NACA, are going to host, keep our fingers crossed, we don't have a name for it yet, but like a spring fling, it'll be an event, shindig or whatever, here on the park here. It'll be sometime first quarter in 2019, and it's going to be a fun day. And we've been trying to figure out what we would like to do to help raise money to put back into the community. And when we were talking to the Parks and Rec people, there was a big need for kids. And anytime that we can do something to help kids and keep them on the right path and off the wrong path, it's like I want to be the first one in line to do that. And so we are tossed around, and what we're thinking about is Parks and Rec has a big need for kids summer camp, that the county has a summer camp, then it goes from 1 week up to 8 weeks, and maybe providing some of the monies that we could raise to do some scholarships, and where the Nokomis community can put back into there. So we're tossing that around, and we're going to meet again with Parks and Rec on the 15th of May, and we'll confirm a date. And the reason I'm mentioning this, if anyone is interested on being on any committees and helping us form ideas, let Vicki know tonight on your way out, and she'll take your name and number, and we'll be in touch with you. But it's something that we want to become an annual event and just keep growing and growing. And you know, Venice does have something going on every weekend, it seems like, and Sarasota does, but we felt like, you know what, our community is large enough, and we've got, I mean, look at the support we've got tonight, but there's tremendous support there, and let's just create something special and be able to maybe put back and help some kids with the summer program. So enough on that. And then our featured speaker tonight is John McCarthy, and I'm going to have his brother come up and introduce John. Yeah, and you said you wanted to mention something about waterways anyway, so this is Pat McCarthy.
Anybody here from the inlets? The inlets? No, surprising. They must all gone home, must have thawed out. Those people work their butts off there in the inlets trying to get cooperation out of the county and the navigation district so they can go in and out with their boats. And the channel in Lions Bay has shoaled in over the course of the last couple of years, and this fall the navigation district is going to dredge that and get that opened up so people can get their boats in and out again. It's deteriorated very rapidly over this summer with the storms and all that. So that's really good news. Those people at the inlets work really hard to make that happen. So we got the John and John show today. This is the second John. John McCarthy, who was born at Fort Myers Beach, my little brother. We moved to Sarasota in '68, and when John got out, John went to Pineview, by the way. Pineview was just a bunch of portables by Alta Vista up there. And so John went to work for the county in the historical department, worked there for a while, moved to the Department of Natural Resources, for many years, where he was heavily involved with the turtle patrol, the sea turtles, Moat Marine, and in fact, John held the license to be able to go out and mess with the turtles, dig up their nests, and whatever was required to document and protect the sea turtles. So after a while of that, another opportunity came up, and he went to work for Parks and Rec. And most everybody here probably knows him as the past director of the Sarasota County Parks and Recreation, which I think, he never left. I think he was your director for 10 years?
Yes, sir.
Yes, and then he retired and immediately went back to work for Scope. And he came here and talked about Scope one time. And then he retired again. And he went back to work. That's what us McCarthys do, we work. So now John's working at Historic Spanish Point. He is the executive director of the Historic Spanish Point up here, and I'm thrilled because my brother's kind of gone full circle. He started out with the history of Sarasota, was always interested in the history, in the pre-history of Sarasota and Florida, and now he's back right in the middle of it at Historic Spanish Point, which he's going to tell us all about tonight, and about some other interesting finds in the area. So my brother John McCarthy.
That's one of the best introductions I've ever had. Coming from family, that's pretty cool. That's right, I think I've kind of lectured here on every topic for every career I've had, and I keep just kind of recycling them. Does anybody need me to use the microphone?
Yes.
Yes. All right, I'll do my best. I'm going to have to unwind this bad boy. So before I get into the presentation tonight, I just want to say a few things, maybe connect some dots here of other things that people have been saying. I heard Bill say earlier about this woman with the signs that I think the quote was something like, she loves Nokomis and she's concerned about the future. You know, and frankly, I hear from people almost every day that are concerned about the future. And they ask me what I think about Sarasota. And I love Sarasota. I love everything about Sarasota. I love Sarasota from Newtown to Northport. We've got the Gulf of Mexico out there. Who could have anything better than that? We've got all these islands from Longboat to Lido to Siesta to Casey to Venice to Minnesota Key. Gorgeous little islands. We've got all these bays. We've got the NACA River out here, kind of like another bookend. We've got all this preserved land that the leaders in the community have seen fit to preserve. And so there's a lot to love about Sarasota. And I guess, you know, you think about the big box stores and the McDonald's, and I don't mean to throw any fast food place under the bus, but you know, you can find that stuff anywhere, folks. But what kind of stuff do you find only in Sarasota County? See, that's the stuff that really turns me on. You know, places like Snook Haven. Who's got another Snook Haven? Nobody's got another Snook Haven, right? Pretty cool place. You know, even places like Sharky's out on the pier. You know, we only got one pier. There's really only one place in Sarasota County where we go out and have a meal on the Gulf, but we got one, this down there. You know, who else has got a mile of Gulf frontage on the beach with nothing but palm trees? Casperson Beach. Thanks to the law enforcement officers, there used to be some other things going on out there, but now they got just palm trees, for the most part. And so, you know, Pat and I, we've come up here from Fort Myers Beach, we spent our whole lives here, we're both pretty committed to the community, and I happen to dwell in this history business, but realistically I think if people paid a little bit more attention to the history, we'd have a little bit better sense of kind of where we're going. I was talking to some folks today, they're trying to figure out, you know, Bay Street's being widened in Osprey out east. They're going to have, I guess, a big road out there coming into the Bay Street there, and they're like, well, how come the county doesn't have any plans of this road? They can't tell us what this road is made out of. And I said, well, that's because that road was built as part of the original Tamiami Trail. You know, it came up what's now 41, it went out Bay Street, it went up Old Venice Road. That's why that's called Old Venice Road. That was the old Tamiami Trail. And so that was before the county was even created. So anyway, I think about what makes Sarasota County special, and when I worked at Scope, we were all about numbers and stuff like that. So I came to tell you about like how the schools were doing and how we were doing in economy and all that. But I learned something tonight, folks. I learned that we have low crime, which I know is the case, low crime rate in Sarasota County, and yet we're seeing more and more of this traffic congestion. Tonight I learned that the two are directly related. that caught the perp because he was stuck in traffic. I'm sorry. Anyway, these places that make Sarasota County special. So now I'm out kind of on a circuit doing these presentations about this Minnesota Key offshore site. And one of the first presentations I did just a couple of weeks ago for Lemon Bay Historical Society, they usually have about 30 people come out to their meeting, and about 2 weeks before the meeting they said, John, we're going to change the venue. We're going to go meet out at the Methodist Church out on East Dearborn Street because we've been getting a lot of calls. We had 560 plus people come to that session. Last Thursday night, I was down at the Hermitage on Minnesota Key. We had 225 people come, and they turned away so many people that on May 3rd, I'm going back to the Hermitage to do it again. And of course, Bill reaches out to me to say, hey, come and do it for NACA. And I'm like, sure, we can squeeze that in. You're close to Osprey. You're close to historic Spanish Point. I got involved in this because Mark Pritchett, the CEO of Gulf Coast Community Foundation, called me up one day and said, John, Secretary of State Ken Dessner's called me, and we found a very interesting archaeological site offshore Sarasota County, and it's going to make some waves, and we want you to be a part of it. And so we started convening meetings at Historic Spanish Point with the archaeologists and with some other stakeholders and with people that you might not expect to be associated with an archaeological site. And so I'm kind of here tonight to give you a little update on this thing. Like Snook Haven, one of a kind, right? And by the way, there's only one Sarasota on the planet. There's only one Sarasota. There's a lot of towns, got a lot of towns with the same name. There's only one Sarasota. There's only one Snook Haven. There's only one Sharkies. This Minnesota Key offshore site is globally significant because it is the only one of its kind on planet Earth. By the time we get to the end of the program, you'll understand what I mean by that. But if you look at this title slide here, you notice I got the NACA logo up there, at least whatever I could pull off the Google. And it says globally significant archaeological site, kind of above the surface. That's what it is. Below the surface, it is the ancestral burial grounds of Florida's indigenous people. I think one thing we have to keep in mind with the burial site is that this is someone's loved ones. The fact that they were buried 7,000 years ago really doesn't change that. And so dealing with this site requires a certain amount of attention and a certain amount of respect and reverence and care and all that stuff. So at any rate, the Secretary of the State, working with Gulf Coast Community Foundations, convened this group, and I am authorized to present this to you tonight. This is basically a presentation of the Department of State, Bureau of Archaeological Research. Gulf Coast Community Foundation got involved because they believe in the future of the community and they want to be involved in things that make bold difference in the community. And this is just a screenshot off of their website, and I think it's great because it shows the kids, because I personally don't think history is about the past. I think history is about the future, and when we understand our history, we get a much better sense of place. And as we have a much better sense of place, we have a much lesser of a chance of becoming anywhere USA, which is what all that big box stuff is that all kind of makes me irritated. So these are some of the stakeholders that have been involved, and it starts with the Seminole Tribe of Florida, and it's been the Seminole Tribe Historic Preservation Office, the staff of the Atiki Museum down in Big Cypress. They say this is the first time they've been invited in on the front end of an archaeological project. They usually have to fight their way in on the back end. They've been invited in on the front end. Sarasota Sheriff's Office, they've been out working the site, helping us to protect it because it's exceptionally vulnerable. Florida Gulf Coast University staff have been doing some of the analysis. Sarasota County Government, the History Center, Gulf Coast Heritage Association, which is actually who I work for, the organization that runs Historic Spanish Point, Venice Museum and Archives, been at the table. Ringling College of Art and Design. Why would we invite Ringling College of Art and Design to a meeting about archaeology? Because we want them to help us with the interpretive materials to do better educational programs to bring this stuff out to the community and show you what's going on. Venice PD, Fish and Wildlife Commission, Florida Public Archaeology Network, which is a group that helps people understand archaeology and actually do archaeology out in the community. Minnesota Key Association and South Minnesota Sandpiper Association are two groups that are helping us to keep eyes on the site. And Dream Large, which is a marketing firm that works closely with Gulf Coast Community Foundation. So what we're here tonight is to tell you what we've found, why are we engaging you now, and what can you do to help. So everybody knows Venice is Shark's Tooth capital of the world, right? Another one of those unique things to Sarasota. You can go up North Carolina coast and find them too, but you find all these bones down here. And for years everybody's asked me, John, why do I find shark's teeth at the same place I find a mastodon tooth? The shark's teeth are 10 million years old. The mastodon's 10,000, 20,000 years old. we happen to have a situation offshore where we have these fossil beds exposing two different time periods. One, when Florida was completely submerged, the Pliocene, 10 million years ago, sharks, manatees, whales, stuff like that. And then we got the Pleistocene, when the Ice Age came and the sea level went super far lower, and you got all these animals living out there where we now boat, fish, and swim. You find them all together on the beach. It's kind of amazing. Anyway, people come for this stuff, and they go diving all the time, and they get the big ones. Pat will tell you, we probably hadn't moved to Sarasota more than a couple weeks. Our dad took us down to Casperson, and we were down there sifting with masonry trowels, trying to find shark's teeth in the sand. So anyway, in June of 2016, guy goes out on a charter. The charter was advertising, come dive on a prehistoric burial ground. And anyway, they went out there, they poked around, they brought some stuff home, the guy found something, he set it on his dining room table, and a couple weeks later, the barnacles started to come off, and he began to realize that what he was looking at on the table looked a lot like a jawbone. Come to the conclusion that he had a human jawbone. So he called Tallahassee, and he says, hey, I was on this dive charter, I went down, I pulled this up, I got it sitting here on my dining room table, I don't think I'm supposed to have it, what do you think? And of course, the divers were like, well, you know, the archaeologists were like, well, you know, there's nothing out there, it's just a sandy bottom, right? But they said, we're going to come down and check it out. So they come down. Bureau of Archaeological Research is responsible for protection and research of archaeological sites on all state-owned land. So this is your state parks, your state forests, a lot of your preserved lands. And so the map on the left, you can kind of see everything that they're associated with in the terrestrial world. But they're also responsible for protecting and researching archaeological sites in state-owned submerged lands, which is going out several miles out into the Gulf of Mexico. So that clearly put this particular site within their realm of responsibility. And frankly, when you hear about a burial underwater, one of the also things you have to kind of figure out, is this a prehistoric burial, or is this somebody with a chain and a concrete block tied to it? So anyway, they sent this team down to Sarasota. I've had a chance to meet all these folks. Neil Puckett, Franklin Price, Ryan Duggins in the middle is the supervisor of the team, Melissa Price and Ivor Malema. This is your Bureau of Archaeological Research team doing underwater archaeology all over the state of Florida. They've been spending quite a bit of time down here, as much time as they can. They drive down from Tallahassee. Anyway, this investigation begins. They're out in the boat. They got to use some technology. So this is a side scan sonar device. Finding an archaeological site like this is like needle in a haystack. There's no way a professional archaeologist is ever going to go out and find a site like this. These sites are always found by amateurs, as in the case here. A diver goes out, goes on a charter, finds something, comes back up, knows the general location, so they put this thing down there, and it's a pretty cool device. And so this is kind of an image of what that looks like. It got the boat up there, you got the side scan sonar, and if you look at the bottom of this image, you see those two brown areas? So that's kind of an artistic rendering to help you understand the next images. Because the next images are actually little frame shots from the side scan sonar. So going down the middle, don't worry about that black. It's not a black hole. It's just the side scan isn't doing anything there. It's looking out in both directions. And you see what you would expect to see on the beach any day, or if you look down in the water, clear water day, it's just ripply sand. But then they started seeing other stuff. You see all the contours off to the side? So they started seeing this, and they started seeing this, and they said, okay, we've kind of found the place. So then they go diving. But here's the pattern that they followed. Up and down the beach, up and down, back and forth, diagonals, trying to determine what was the extent of that funky contour. And this is all offshore Minnesota Key. So this is kind of what they found. What they found was remnants of the ancient landscape out in the Gulf of Mexico. So this is where you kind of have to put yourself back in time and think about the Ice Age is in full bore, the glaciers have taken up all the water, sea level at this point is 33 feet lower than it is today, and like I said before, where we swim, fish, and boat, that was all exposed land. It was as if you went out to the Carlton Reserve and looked at the pine flatwoods and the marshes and all this stuff. It was out there. It's been inundated by rising sea level. So here they did these penetrations where you can see the water column, you can see the sand, and in between the water and the sand is this layer of peat that's about a foot thick. Now, you can go out and buy peat moss at the store and use it to plant your orchids or whatever you want to do in your garden. Peat is simply the decomposed organic material at the bottom of a marsh or a pond. And one of the aspects of peat is as it gets settled in over the years and it accumulates and accumulates and accumulates, it creates what's called an anaerobic environment. No oxygen is in there. And so things that are laid down in peat have a tendency to survive a long time. And so what they found is the possibility or the probability of a marsh or a pond, fresh water, again from this ancient landscape, a possible channel feature, and then some features that look like freshwater springs coming up through cracked limestone. So if you put yourself back in time, you need fresh water to survive, and so the spring, and then these folks are living around this pond and ultimately interred in their death in the pond. So they started doing sediment core samples on the outside edge so that they could begin to get an understanding of how big is this marsh, how big is this pond, what is the extent of the peat, what's the extent of the area. And so they do this by driving a PVC pipe down into the bottom, cutting it open, and then exposing it. And ultimately they'll be able to look at the organic material, the peat itself, what the composition is. They may be able to get pollen samples out of it, which could be analyzed. It would tell them more about the prehistoric environment. And also they're getting an understanding of the depth of the peat and the sand type and everything else that goes with it. So these are some photos up at Spanish Point in our classrooms, bringing together all the stakeholders, again, to talk about how do we protect the site, how do we educate the public about the site, what kind of research is appropriate for the site, and how do we do this as a collaboration, not just as archaeologists going out and digging things up. Investigation continues. So, in 20 feet of water, offshore Minnesota Key, in this peat layer are human burials that were laid down 7,200 years ago. And when these folks were deceased, the body was kind of in a fetal position, wrapped in a blanket, if you will, of some sort of plant fiber, placed on a little table of woven material, and staked down into place with wooden stakes that were sharpened, shaped, fire hardened, put into place, and then a little piece of rope or cord tied around the top to kind of hold it together. And that's what's still out there. So it was done 7,000 years ago, a fairly fragile way to inter someone. And what you're looking at in this particular image is one of those sets of stakes, below which is a human burial, and then on the right-hand side, one of those wooden stakes. They don't yet know what type of wood it is. That's going to be fascinating to me. Is it cypress? Is it pine? Is it mangrove? You know, what is it? But at any rate, that's something that they can do. And the radiocarbon dates come back 7,000 years before present. So at the top is kind of an artist's rendering. If you look at that, you can see the stakes. You can see the little platform. You can see the people in a fetal position. And we believe that the stakes might have gone above the surface of the water. In other words, it would have been like almost having a marker, where you would look out on this marsh and you could see your loved one out there because those stakes were sticking out above the water. And then this rendering that was put together by Ringling is basically a scene out at Little Salt Spring around the edge, showing an example of a cemetery like this, where here's a recently deposited one or recently interred one. Here's an old one that's kind of fallen apart, a couple that are kind of deteriorating and coming apart. But actually, you know, it wasn't like everyone was buried at the same time. This was a long time tradition. It's not unusual to find a burial like this. In fact, the first burial like this was found in 1967 out in Republic Groves out by Zolfo Springs. And they were out there digging in what they called a bayhead swamp, and they found these burials this exact same way. 1979, Carl Clausen, the state underwater archaeologist at the time, working at Little Salt Spring, ventured north of the spring one day and found in the marsh, which is just next door to the law enforcement training driving course, hundreds of burials interred in this same way in Little Salt Spring Slough, dating to approximately 6,000 years old. Down in Naples at 2 locations, out in a cypress swamp, again, early 1980s, same thing was found. And then in 1981, over in Windover near Titusville, the same thing was found in what they called a muck pond. So we've got these same sort of burial rituals in a muck pond in Titusville, in a bayhead swamp outside of Zolfo Springs, at Little Salt Spring Slough in Sarasota County, in a cypress swamp down in Naples, and now Minnesota Key offshore. What's the difference between Minnesota Key offshore? It's offshore. It's currently underwater. All the others are still in a terrestrial landscape. So Florida's changing landscape. This is the way Florida looks today. Going back in time, go back to the peak of the Ice Age, Florida was twice as wide. The type of critters that were here: mammoth, mastodon, giant ground sloth, big tortoises like the Galapagos tortoises, saber-toothed tigers, camels, horses, giant ground sloths, all sorts of these what they call Pleistocene megafauna that actually coexisted with humans for a period of time here, as evidenced by artifacts at Little Salt Spring. But anyway, so there's Florida like 20 to 15,000 years ago, so that's a lot of land, right? In fact, if you think about where the people were living, one might say that 50% of Florida's archaeological sites from this early period, Paleo and early Archaic, are all offshore. They'd have to be, right? Because it's offshore now. And it's coming up in time about 9,000 years ago. Florida's shrunk down a little bit. You see that it's still much wider than it is today. And then with the side profile there, I got a red dot there where Minnesota Key site kind of factors in, still above water, because again, it's a woods environment, it's a freshwater wetland environment, a marsh environment, and it's still quite a distance. I kind of asked the folks at the Hermitage last week, I said, look to the horizon, that's where the water's edge was, that's where the beach was. And yet this site is really only about a football field off of Minnesota Key. So it's a very, very terrestrial site. And then here you have early man hunting bears and other large animals there at this time. And then present day, Melissa Price down there diving on the site. And now the site is completely inundated. It's inundated under 20 feet of water. That's pretty cool stuff. All right, here's a timeline that's going to be really hard for y'all in the back to see this. I apologize, but let me run you through what it is. Again, talking about how unique Sarasota County is, you couldn't go to another county in Florida and find this kind of continuity of all these sites. We've got Little Salt Spring at 12,000 years before present, where man was documented consuming giant ground sloth and the big Galapagos tortoises that used to be all over the planet, by the way. Now they're just at the Galapagos. They used to be all over the whole planet, including plenty of them here in Florida. You got Warm Mineral Springs at 10,000 years old. You got the Minnesota Key offshore site at 7,000 years old. You got 6,000 years at Little Salt Spring Slough Cemetery. You got 4,500 to 5,000-year-old middens at historic Spanish Point. Now, I can assure you folks that probably nobody in the room is ever going to go down and look and see this 7,000-year-old site off of Minnesota Key, but you can come to historic Spanish Point any day of the week and see prehistoric shell mounds and learn about Native Americans. And then, because I've been doing a lot of these shows in Inglewood, I wanted to put this in perspective with some of the sites that people go to all the time in Inglewood. So, for instance, Paulson Point, or what they call Indian Mound Park down south of Dearborn Street, the oldest remains there are 3,000 years old. And then coming up, a lot of people down there remember back in 1988, the guys putting in a swimming pool, and they come across a cemetery on Minnesota Key, on terrestrial site, and there were a lot of volunteer work put into that. That site dated from 1,700 to 1,300 years ago. And then there are middens, little shell middens, places where people camped and disposed of oysters and scallops and clams and whelks and all those things that the Native Americans ate. And they're scattered all over Minnesota Key, and they date from about 800 to 1,200 years ago. And then the most recent deposits at the top of the mound at Indian Mountain Park are really only about 600 years ago. And 500 years ago, Ponce de Leon shows up in Charlotte Harbor, and the Indians shoot him with an arrow, and that's the end of that. But that kind of brings you all the way up through the present day. The archaeologists have these different categories. They call these really old sites, like the 10,000-year-olds. This is Paleo-Indian sites. And then all the Minnesota Key offshore, Little Salt Spring, historic Spanish Point, and the earliest stuff at Indian Mountain Park is all within the Archaic period. Then in the more modern time, that 2,000 to 1,000 years ago is called the Minnesota culture. It's not named for the island, it's named for the predominant culture that was here in Sarasota and Manatee County, and simply a name that the archaeologists have given it. And then the most recent stuff, like 1,000 years up till Spanish context, is called Safety Harbor, because there was a site in Safety Harbor where they started finding all this very ornate pottery that was from a very late period. And so any other place where they find that ornate pottery, they say that's part of the Safety Harbor culture. So anyway, there's a lot of info on here, but it just means to say that Native Americans have been living here for a very long time, including the 12,000 years ago. So this is a photograph out at the Carlton Reserve. This is what the Gulf of Mexico used to look like before sea level came up to where it is now. 7,200 years ago, sea level was 33 feet lower than it is today. And what's now submerged was similar to today's flatwoods. The human remains were protected by the peat. That's the only reason why those remains are still there. And then amazingly, and I should have emphasized that, even the cordage that tied these sticks together is still down there after 7,000 years. Global significance. There's 3 sites. Well, let me just say this. This is the only burial site in North or South America, Native American burial site that's in a submerged marine environment. It's the only one in North or South America in a marine submerged environment. There's only 3 examples on the planet, and one of those is in Denmark, one of them is in Israel. Both of those 2 are in clay. So they're in a marine environment. They're also from a time when sea level was lower, but they're embedded in clay, which had the same effect as the peat in keeping out the oxygen, so they were preserved. But the only one on the planet that's preserved in peat and currently in a marine environment is the Minnesota Key offshore site, making us kind of one of a kind, unique on the planet. This might be why the site's getting so much attention. So the press release came out from the Ken Dessner's office at the Secretary of State on February 28th. By March 1st, local ABC News were the first ones to pick up on it. And actually, they kind of had a story in the can for a while, and we were asking them not to publicize it until we had some more protective strategies in place. But within 24 hours, National Geographic and Smithsonian, it was all over the place. And so in both of these, they feature some of the video clips that were provided by the Secretary of State's office, and they talk about the global significance of the site. And then some of the other sites that are popular archaeology sites, ancient pages, and then this live science one, which I think is kind of cool. Florida is the most recognizable geography on the planet. If you just go out and grab anybody on the planet and ask them where Florida is, more people know where Florida is than any other place. But I like how that arrow is going to the beach out here. It's like, hey, if you don't know where this is, bam, it's right there. And so this is amazing. Within a couple of weeks, there were 500 million hits on this site. And that's not uncommon for bad news, folks, but that's very unusual for good news. So the objectives now are to try to preserve the site, respectfully document and understand the site. And one of the ways we do that, again, is working with the Seminole tribe in terms of what the strategy is going to be. This is a real challenge. This site is exposed now. I mean, you think about it. Sea level came up gradually and the sand came in. And the sand covered this whole environment out there. Covered the old peat, covered the marsh, covered everything. Everything stayed intact. It's kind of hard to believe that happened. But now it's being eroded out. So the peat's kind of being eroded out. Even the burials are being eroded out to a certain extent. The question is, well, how do you save that? How do you protect it? How do you protect it from vandals? And then how do you protect it from what nature is doing? And the Seminole tribe looks at it and says, hey, nature's going to do what nature's going to do. The Creator's going to take care of it. But the scientists say, well, we don't want it just to wash up on the beach, you know? And so it might be a strategy of depositing sand, putting sand back on top of it to kind of preserve it and set it aside. But we also want to educate the community about it because it's part of this tapestry of Sarasota's heritage. The implications for future discoveries is staggering. In fact, since the presentation I did at the Hermitage, I've had 2 people come forward showing me projectile points that they found on the beach. One is a guy from England who's here visiting, and when he was here last year found a projectile point. There was a woman on the beach who had gone to the program at the Hermitage. She strikes up a conversation with this guy on the beach, tells him about the site, and he says, hey, I found an arrowhead. Last time I was here, it's back in England. He sent me photographs of it today. He still had them in his camera that makes phone calls. And then another young man came forward and said that he had found something, and other people are coming forward. So the amazing thing is that somewhere out there is another site. And again, it's not going to be found by professional archaeologists. It's going to be found by an amateur diver, or maybe a fisherman that pulls up something interesting. And in fact, I'm going to be doing a program for reef rovers soon, because the divers that are down there all the times are the ones most likely to find this. And we're thinking, you know, this is just the burial site. Where's the shell bin that goes with it? You know, where's the habitation site? Where are the other components of the village that this cemetery is a part of? Because it isn't just a cemetery. There's got to be other stuff out there. And so we really want to engage the community so that folks don't feel like they can't speak up about it. And we'd encourage people that have discovered things to kind of come forward because it's of such significance. While all this is going on, this caught my eye. Up off the coast of Alabama, they've discovered a cypress swamp that's 50 to 60,000 years old, that's completely inundated by the Gulf of Mexico, covered up by sand, but it became uncovered. And if you look at the right-hand picture, you see they used a side-scan sonar, the exact same technology used out here to find this site, to find this cypress swamp after the dive shop owner came up and he says, hey, I found this cool place, we've got to take you down and show it to you. They used the side-scan sonar. They've actually found that it's a whole river going through the cypress swamp, and all the trees are still in place, and it's sitting at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. And look at the wood. The wood in the cypress is preserved like it's, like yesterday. It's 50,000 years old. It's not petrified. It's not fossilized. It's just preserved by the peat that it was down in, the organics of its own site. And then it kind of was funny to me because here we're working with Ringling College to do these diagrams showing where the old coastline was, and up in Alabama they're showing the same kind of image. Here's the Ice Age coastline, here's where it is now, this thing's offshore. And then this other little photo here is Hurricane Ivan. The blue dots, if you can see them, are where buoys were jerked loose by the hurricane, and then the route of the hurricane going in went right over where this forest is. So we've got a submerged archaeological site that's 7,000 years old. They've got a submerged cypress swamp that they wouldn't expect to find any people associated with because it's too old. It's 50,000 years old. But it just seems interesting that there's this huge growing awareness of what could be lying out on the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. So in terms of protective strategies, again, I've said some of these things before. I'll just move on to the next slide. We got some site monitoring going on. We got law enforcement involved, and I photoshopped this and put the patrol boats and the helicopter right on top of the site. And we got Venice PD working with Sarasota Sheriff's Office, working with Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. Believe it or not, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission has the responsibility of protecting archaeological and historical sites in Florida as well as the wildlife. They are the chief law enforcement entity to do that, but basically your Venice PD and your Sarasota Sheriff's Office are the ones that are on the site. So somebody asked me the other night, well, what we're doing to protect it, how can they respond? And I said, look, we got a telescope on this site that is so big and powerful that by the time you come up with your snorkel, they've read the serial number, they've figured out what dive shop you bought it from, they've run your credit card back, and law enforcement's at your home talking to your wife before you get home with the boat. So everybody thought that was funny. But there are some eyes on the site. We've engaged homeowners on Minnesota Key with eyes on the site. I was out 2 weeks ago presenting to the Minnesota Key Sea Turtle Patrol that are on the beach every day and many of the nights. And there's a lot of support. Now, I got to move on from this one. That was for Turtle Patrol. What will be discovered next, I think, is the big question. Because there's certainly other stuff out there, and we really urge anybody that's heard of anything to say, come forward and say, hey, I think I might have found something else. Because that's really going to help to build our understanding of the prehistory of Florida. And again, there's more than just this thing. If you know if someone is actively looting the site, you can call the non-emergency number at the sheriff's office on the little green card, which is awesome because I'm always forgetting that number. Or you can call the hotline for the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. If you think there's someone, and by that I mean maybe you were at a restaurant and somebody was saying, hey, I'm going out there in a half hour and I'm going to go plunder that site, you might want to call these folks, although you'll see my next thing here says, if you hear about someone looting or hear or know about a new site, contact Ryan. Now, I've got this contact information on some sheets of paper up here in front, so you don't have to memorize that or jot it down. And again, this program was designed primarily for folks for Minnesota Key. So those are the folks that are going to have their eyes on a little bit more than you, but lots of y'all boat, and some of you dive, and a lot of you fish and stuff like that. So anyway, that kind of leaves it open for questions, and I'd be happy to take a couple questions, and I want to tell you about a few of the other things I have sitting up here on the table. Bruce?
It sounds like that coast may be later on.
It may be. It may be. We're going to find out.
Exactly the same way as they do now?
Well, that's right. So didn't tell you much about the people. So the people that lived here then had about the same body composition as we have, same brain capacity, no language that's been recorded, no written stuff that's been recorded. We don't know, even the people at Spanish Point, we don't know what their tribal name was, what they called themselves. When the Europeans arrived in the 1500s, The people in the Charlotte Harbor area were called the Calusas. The people in Tampa Bay were called the Tocobagas. Sarasota's kind of halfway in between. We weren't Calusa territory. We weren't Tocobaga. We're in between. We will never know what people called themselves 500 years ago. We'll never know what these people called themselves 7,000 years ago. They moved from a hunting and gathering type of an existence to one based on seafood. You know, they had a lot of availability of seafood. They got into shell tool technology about 5,000–6,000 years ago, moving from stone technology to shell tool technology. They had enough free time to do artistic things, like jewelry and other things in addition to just tools. And there's more that we don't know about them than what we do know about them. We do know that they hunted very effectively. They hunted birds, they hunted marine turtles, they hunted deer, they hunted anything that they could get their hands on. They collected vast quantities of fish and shellfish. They were purposefully building the shell middens higher and higher and higher. At Spanish Point, we're 20 feet above sea level. You know, get above the storm tide, get above the high tide, get a better view, get better breeze, fewer mosquitoes, all those things, protection from hurricanes. So they were very smart in what they did. They were somewhat nomadic. We know that the folks that lived at Spanish Point from about 2,000 years ago to 1,000 years ago, we had a matrilinear society there. In other words, the Spanish Point was ruled by women. And in our burial mound, all the women are related to one another, and they're actually buried in little plots of even closer family relationships, and none of the men in their Indian mound are related to one another. They were traveling in and out from other places. So the women kind of ruled the roost at Spanish Point. Whether that was the case in other areas, we don't know. Now we're looking at the ceramics to try to figure out, is all the ceramics from that time period the same, which would suggest that the women created the ceramics, or is the ceramics all very different, which would suggest that the men created the ceramics and brought that technology from other places. There's a site here in Nokomis off of Curry Creek, which was a pottery creation site, a place where there was clay embedded in the creek shoreline, and a place where the people would actually come to make their pottery vessels and then probably take them to many other places. So there's some things we do know, there's a lot of things we don't know. We know hardly anything about these people 7,000 years ago, except they were kind of in the middle of sea level was already coming up. It had already come up tremendously from where it was 10,000 years ago, and it was kind of on the rise. And I said something down at the Hermitage the other day, which was basically these people might have been smarter than us because they actually retreated from it. They actually responded to. Anyway, other questions? Yes?
Is there any chance that it would widen again, that would reverse and the sea level would go down?
Is there any chance that it would widen again? Yeah, I mean, as I understand it, the Earth takes about 10,000 years to get around the Milky Way. Okay, so we talk about, us going around the sun. The sun takes about 10,000 years to get around the Milky Way, and that causes this 10 to 20,000 year old cycle with the ice and the non-ice. We got other things at play today, I think, from a scientific standpoint. But what the concern is now is, of course, that it's coming up, not going back down.
Yeah, you mentioned that reversal of the site where you want to protect it from going down again. I thought, well, is it reversing?
Okay, well, see, the thing is about that is just that you've got the waves. So let's say Irma had come up through the Gulf of Mexico instead of going out toward Arcadia, then this site could have been wiped out by that. Just the tidal action, and the scouring of the sand. So that's why I suggest that, one of the solutions to protecting it might be to add more sand there. But that sand's going to wash away, so then you've got to get the coastal engineer involved and kind of figure out, well, how much sand do you have to put there? Other people have asked questions about what is the implication for beach renourishment. Well, in this particular case, there's no planned beach renourishment in the area of this site. But certainly it causes us to ponder in the future where we get the sand from. Now they try to keep it off the coral bottoms, the live bottom communities, and just go out and get it where it's nice and sandy. That's also more beach compatible. But then they've got also going to have to look and see, well, where are they dragging the pipes and stuff along the bottom? Because the potential of more sites is tremendous. It's just that nothing like this has ever been found before. Although back in the 70s, there was a scientist, Ray Rupe from the University of Arizona, that spent years trying to find this type of site offshore Venice, and he was convinced they were there. He found one site that was kind of a site that was both land and water, but nothing like this. So he knew it was there back in the 70s. It just took this long to expose it.
Well, we know that you have to go 90, 100 miles out to get good fishing water here for some of the stuff. So obviously your charts show with the progression of the water table getting higher and what would have been land. What is the chance going out that shelf that there civilizations that are even larger, older.
Well, I mean, it's all possible. Up to 12,000 years ago would be very understandable because we've already got that documented at Little Salt Spring. You start going back into 20,000 years ago, and that's kind of the oldest people in North America. So it apparently didn't take people very long to get, across Bering Strait, down across the country, all the way down into Florida, and all the way down to Argentina by about, somewhere between 15 and 20,000 years ago. So again, sea level then was 45 feet lower, so there's a tremendous possibility, but it's just like a needle in a haystack to find it, and the further out you go, the less chance you're actually going to find it. Somebody would just have to be diving there and find something really highly unusual, and out there the wave action isn't stirring it up so much as it is closer to shore. Anything's possible.
Yes, was the carbon dating of the wooden stakes pretty consistent in time? Or
Yeah.
Was there a spread of time indicating?
No, it's very precise. It's like 7,210 years old, and they'll do some other work as well. But carbon dating is very accurate now as long as you're dating what you're trying to date. In other words, you can't date something next to it. You got to date the thing, and it has to be organic. And the other thing is that they have done some DNA work on the actual skeletal material themselves, because the first thing they had to do is document that it's not a modern interment, that it is indeed a prehistoric interment, not a modern interment. Yes?
The size of the burial site, can you estimate how big that community was?
Well, that's a great question. Right now, we don't even know how many burials are down there. They've worked 6 different burials, but the new burials are being exposed all the time, and they believe it's quite an extensive cemetery. And they're trying to understand the edge of where that is. And then you could take and extrapolate from that maybe how large that population was based upon when some of the first interments were done and some of the later interments, kind of get an understanding of the time horizon, and then try to figure that out. We've never really done that even for Spanish Point with the burials there to kind of say, well, if there's that many people there that died, then how many people were there living? But, a good mathematician could do that. Yes?
Are there, you said the growth was there, are there any other things that were considered like clothing?
Well, the kind of the remnants of the blankets, if you will, that were covering the bodies, the wood, the cordage, and there's rumors of other artifacts that other people have found there, but they haven't. The goal of the archaeologists in this case is not to go down and dig up all these burials, and I should have made that clear earlier. They're trying to deal with the potholes that have already been done by others, and they're trying to understand the ones that have been exposed now by the erosion, and they're trying to zoom in on the very specific things that would help them get a radiocarbon date, get the DNA samples. So and it's time-consuming work and it's difficult work, and there's not a lot of visibility. And so they're just taking it very slow and sure. They're planning on doing some additional dives this summer, and that'll give them an opportunity to be looking at some of the other areas. So right now there's not a wide assemblage of artifacts, but it's just kind of hard to believe when you think about a 7,000-year-old piece of wood and a 7,000-year-old piece of cord, and the bones, which again are not mineralized, they're not fossilized, they're preserved by the anaerobic, no oxygen in the peat.
You said whether there was physical markings that block this area off?
There are not physical markings to block it off. They're working on some permitting now to get some permission to do some buoys. That's going to have 2 effects. Number one, it's going to be able to alert people not to mess with the remains, which is a felony to mess with human remains. But it's also going to be a beacon and show everybody where the site is. So, we're really trying to work through some of those things. Do you put the sign up saying, here's the site, keep away from it? Or, and there's a number of people that know where it is. I mean, it's becoming less and less of a secret all the time. Or, but it's going to be difficult for law enforcement to enforce any laws regarding it. At the same token, we got pretty good law enforcement in Sarasota County, and they're kind of on it. So we got all these eyes from the beach that are on it, to the extent that a boat went by today, kind of sounded the alarm, and there's a stream of phone calls and emails. So it's a pretty neat system. It's like cooking a telegraph. Somebody sees something, they know where it is, they see it, they start making some phone calls, the eyes are on it, somebody's investigating, deputies were out there. Nobody was on the site, they were a little bit further away, but at any rate, the response was there. Any other questions?
You have a display at Spanish Point that shows a cross-section through.
Correct. We have a display at Spanish Point that you can walk inside, which is called Windows of the Past, which is 2,000 years old at the bottom and 1,000 years old at the top, and it's all the layers of life. Oysters, scallops, whelks, clams. It represents 1,000 years of partying at Spanish Point. And you can see areas where the mound built up slowly. You can see where they were purposely building it up more. You can see little fire pit areas. Spanish Point's a pretty cool thing. How many in the room have been to Spanish Point? Awesome. I love you all. And if you haven't been there, come. We're doing some different, well, if you haven't been there, or if you're not a member, there's a $1 off coupon if you want one of these. So, and then if you've never been there and you want to kind of see what it's all about, this is a cool brochure with a map inside. And then we're trying to do some things to get people to come out that have never been there before. So like on May 6th, we're doing this classic car show with the Venice AACA, the Antique Auto Club of America. We're going to have cars all over Spanish Point. And we're going to open up early on Sunday. This is the little thing that tells you who to call if you hear about somebody who's found an archaeological site underwater, if you want to come up and get that. And then let me tell you, by example, some of the other things that we're doing at Spanish Point, because I'm putting a lot of pressure on the staff to behave like a Parks and Rec operation. In fact, I hired some folks from Parks and Rec to help me run the place. And we got kind of like art history lectures. We got art classes going on almost every day. We're doing these scavenger hunts. Every full moon, we got the ghost tours. We've got the magic boat. This is reproduction of this turn-of-the-century boat. You can buy a ticket for that and go out for about an hour. That's pretty cool. I've got a little memorial walk that I'm doing. Mrs. Potter Palmer, who lived on the site, and she was from Chicago, and her family donated the site to the county. She passed away May 5th of 1918, so I'm doing a memorial walking tour on May 5th of 2018, 100 years later. Yeah, so that's just me. I'm just going to be talking about her impact on the county and her impact on the site. Anyway, we got a lot of stuff going on. We're getting ready to plan. Oh, we got a Battle of the Bands coming up. Let's see if that's on here. Battle of the Garage Bands, May 19th. That's going to be pretty cool. And then I'm working on a drive-in movie for the kids with the little electric cars. You know, all the kids got the little electric cars? So we're going to do the big screen, we're going to do a drive-in movie, and all the kids are going to pull up in their electric cars, and we'll have cups of popcorn and stuff like that. That's pretty cool. I'm going to go to Target or Walmart, try to get them to give us one of these cars, and somebody will win a new car. A little electric car. So, I think I've consumed my time, Bill. I hope I've achieved the goal.
Exceeded.
Folks, I appreciate you coming to hear about this. Civic Association always gives me such a warm welcome, but I have to tell you, I don't think I've ever driven down the road before and saw my name on the sign. That kind of cracked me up. So thanks, Bill. I appreciate it, man.
All right, now, everybody get your yellow ticket out. And we have compliments of Paradise Grill. Everyone knows where Paradise Grill is. So Mary Beth Hanson, who's the owner, she has great, again, every meeting we have, she graciously gives us a gift certificate. So I'm going to ask John to pull out the winning ticket.
All right, let's do it. Woo! Can't get in here. This one looks like it wants to be full. Okay, 662514. Woo! All right, we got a winner. She's wearing the same color as the ticket.
Congratulations. Good to see you. All right. Okay.
All right, we got another one?
No, that's it.
Oh, that's it. That's one of a kind.
You bet.
All right, here you go, Bill.
Thank you very much. Okay, what do you think, folks? We're very fortunate to have you in our community. I sincerely mean that. And folks, if you haven't been to Spanish Point, take advantage of some of these things that he mentioned. It's a great experience for you. And I'm going to leave you with this. I believe our next meeting will be the last week in July. And we'll probably have a little debate forum with our candidates coming up. There'll be a primary coming up very soon afterwards. So we'll probably have a little debate forum, and I'll keep you posted on that. But thank you so much for coming out tonight. This was awesome. Thank you.